Today we have with us Dr. Patrick Allman-Ward, the CEO of Danagas. Dr. Patrick, thank you for joining Egypt Oil and Gas in this exclusive interview.
Mohammed, it's a pleasure. Thank you. And I always enjoy talking and engaging with you. And Egypt Oil and Gas is the leading magazine for oil and gas affairs in Egypt. It's always a pleasure to participate.
Thank you so much. And I'm sure it's been a long while we haven't talked with you personally, and I'm sure that we have lots of questions, exciting questions to ask you, and our participants today would like to know more about Danagas and its presence in Egypt and the way forward and what you have for the coming years. So, but before we go into 2001 and up forward, let's just give our attendees here a bit of history and us how are you satisfied with Danagas' performance during 2020 last year?
Yeah, thanks, Mohammed. I mean, given the incredible challenges that we all faced in 2020, I have to say that I'm extremely happy with our performance. In the light of the rapid spread of the global pandemic, we managed to keep our production levels up, both in Egypt and the Kurdistan region of Iraq, without any kind of interruption. And as you know, the global pandemic brought with it an unprecedented collapse in oil prices. But despite that, we still managed to make an operating profit for the year. So let me just go into a little bit more detail around that. So first of all, with respect to operations, we could continue with our operations uninterrupted because we put serious restrictions in terms of stringent health and safety protocols in place to keep our operating environments COVID-free. Obviously, our number one thought during the pandemic was to keep our staff healthy and safe. But through the measures that we put in place, we were extremely successful in keeping COVID out of our operations throughout the year. And that meant that we could keep going with our operations. This is particularly important in the Kurdistan region of Iraq, where as you know, our Khor plant provides the gas which supplies over 80% of the power generation for the region, which is, as you can imagine, is critical at the best of times, but in an environment of COVID are even more important, particularly when you think about power supply to hospitals and so forth. But not only did we manage to keep our production levels up, but in the case of the Kurdistan region of Iraq, we actually managed to execute a debottlenecking project in July. And that allowed us to increase production by another 50 million standard cubic feet per day of gas. And that meant that by the fourth quarter of last year, that we were producing at record levels of production in Egypt, over 440 million standard cubic feet per day of gas, or 9% increase quarter on quarter from 2019. But I'm equally proud of our operational performance in Egypt. Here, it's a slightly different story. We're fighting the decline curve, basically, and our reservoirs decline naturally at around 20% per annum. And over the course of last year, we managed to limit that decline to only 8%. And that was a result of a program of workover activities and also optimizing production in a very specific well by well way. And we've planned to carry out a well infill drilling program this year, which actually should result in us increasing production in 2021. And in an environment, Mohammed, where oil prices fell 34% on average over the year, our condensate prices fell on average by more than 43%. The fact that the company still managed to make an operating profit of $36 million, I think is testimony to the company's operational and financial resilience. Of course, we are helped by the fact that we're a gas company, not an oil company, and our gas contracts are relatively independent of oil prices. And so we have a natural hedge against low oil prices. But nevertheless, we do have a significant amount of the value that we generate comes out of our liquid stream. And so I'm very pleased with the financial performance. And then just the last couple of comments maybe about a couple of important strategic objectives that we managed to deliver on last year. The first was that we managed to fully redeem our Sukuk, the outstanding balance of $309 million, which we redeemed on time in October of last year. And in the process of that, we managed to put a new $90 million facility in place with Mashreq Bank, which we're extremely pleased about. And the new facility is very competitively priced and was even actually priced at a level lower than the Sukuk profit rate. And then lastly, of course, as you know, we signed a production sharing agreement with IPR for the sale of our onshore operating assets, producing assets in Egypt. And that took place in October. And I'm sure we'll have an opportunity to come back and discuss progress against that later on in our engagement.
Yes, definitely. That's the exciting part that we're going to get into, of course. But before we go into that, so going on to what you were saying about the business strategy and what you were able to accomplish with those three main aspects that you just mentioned, is there anything that the pandemic altered in your 2020 business strategy?
Well, I think, at a macro level, Mohammed, the answer has got to be no. What we managed to do was to continue to execute our long-term strategy, which was to focus on the high potential growth opportunities in our portfolio. And this includes, obviously, the KRI growth opportunities, but also our offshore Block 6 opportunity in Egypt. So let me provide a little bit of historical context to this, perhaps. Dana Gas entered Egypt in 2007 through purchasing the Centurion assets onshore the Nile Delta. And since then, we've been amazingly successful. We've drilled over 30 exploration wells with over 60% commercial success rate. We've more than doubled our 2P reserves, and we increased production by 50%. But the consequence of that success is that we've really exhausted the supply of commercially attractive drilling opportunities, and the asset base as a whole has become mature. So the name of the game is no longer about increasing production or reserves, but it's really now about minimizing their reduction. And this requires a huge amount of management time and attention. So our board decided that it would really be better use of management's time and the company's resources to really focus on our growth opportunities, as I said, in both Egypt and the Kurdistan region of Iraq. So to illustrate that with some figures, in the Kurdistan region of Iraq, we have over a billion barrels of 2P reserves. And that's Dana Gas share. And in Egypt, we have not been able to replace our production over the course of the last few years. So our 2P reserves have decreased to under 60 million barrels of oil equivalent. And that's the reason why we've decided to sell our onshore mature producing asset and develop the huge resource base that we have in the Kurdistan region of Iraq. And exploring the huge potential of our North Al Arif offshore Block 6 concession area, which we believe holds more than 20 trillion cubic feet of gas, 500 million barrels of liquid. And we're gearing up to drilling an exploration well here in 2023. So that's at the macro level. Obviously, at the annual business plan level, we clearly had to make some necessary and prudential adjustments. Clearly, in the light of the extraordinarily low oil prices, we had to review certain projects, reprioritize them, and push out non-essential projects into later years. And we also needed to take a huge amount of capital and operating cost discipline to our projects and to reduce these costs. In addition, because of the COVID-related restrictions and lockdowns, our contractor in the Kurdistan region of Iraq declared force majeure on the implementation of the KM250 expansion project. But I'm very pleased to say that towards the end of last year in December, under very strict COVID protocols, we managed to get restarted with our civil engineering work. And we think we are now on track to produce first gas by April 2023. And we're looking at other ways that we can further accelerate that program. So I can't emphasize enough how important this KM250 project is for Dana Gas and its partners. The KM250 project will take our total gas production capacity to nearly 700 million standard cubic feet per day of gas. And we hope to carry out a back-to-back exercise of the next 250 million standard cubic feet per day gas train. And that, when we have executed it, we'd hope to get first gas from that second 250 gas train by the end of 2024, would take overall production to nearly a BCF per day of production from the Cornwall field. So a very, very significant project for us and our partners. So Mohammed, I think you're on mute.
Thank you for that. Well, you covered a lot of the questions that I wanted to ask you for, so thank you for that. But let's go back again to the pandemic. And as you know, the pandemic did accelerate digitalization. The concept of digitalization is now changing the way we operate, the way we communicate, and lots of things. So how will Dana Gas further expand its use of digital solutions to optimize operations?
So indeed, Mohammed, a sign of the times. Here we are, not sitting together in a studio having a face-to-face discussion, but we're doing this over the internet. So that's just a sign of how things have changed over the course of the last 9-10 months or so. But I think, you know, the oil and gas industry is a high-risk industry, and so we are used to having crisis management and business continuity plans in place. And in that respect, I think that the industry was pretty well prepared. And not just ourselves, by the way. I mean, if you look back at the unprecedented dislocations that the pandemic imposed on our business, on all of our businesses in 2020, I think it's incredible that our industry continued to supply not only the energy needs of the planet, although slightly diminished, obviously, as we know, but we also managed to gear up to producing the additional petrochemicals required to provide, for example, PPE to frontline healthcare workers, disinfectants, and other materials needed to fight the infection. Of course, we've had to adjust our way of working to adapt to a remote operating environment. And I have to say, I'm amazed by how seamless this adaptation has been. I mean, to some extent, you know, we are lucky in our industry that, you know, at a head office, you know, it adapts quite readily to remote working. Obviously, we have people working on our plants in the field, and maybe we can touch upon how we set about managing to go on with our operations there. But you know, I think it's been amazing how we've managed to adapt to this new normal. And you know, having said that, however, I know that after nearly a year of remote working and working from home, a lot of our staff are looking forward to returning to a more normal, classical working environment. But I have to say there are some things about the remote working environment that have been extremely beneficial for some of our staff. And here I think it has been particularly beneficial to women. And I think there are aspects of that we would like to keep going forwards, to give that flexibility in terms of working environment going forwards. And obviously, you know, monitoring production that's going on in the field, in the remote locations, has required us to rely upon, you know, metrics and internet in an unprecedented way. And I think it's really put a couple of things into sharp perspective. The first is that we need to make sure that our systems are secure, because along with the migration of working to the internet, there's also been a migration, unfortunately, of people who are taking advantage of that for criminal ends. And then, secondly, I think it's the robustness of the internet and the bandwidth that we need to make sure that we have in order to be able to keep our lines of communication robust. Sorry, Mohammed, you're back on mute again.
Yeah, I'm not used to actually keep myself on mute. I have to get used to this. Before we go into the IPR acquisition and what's going on there, I just want to still continue on last year, because I think last year was a change in mindset, and it was an exceptional year on how we operate and how we maintain also our production plans. So how did Danagas manage to maintain its production plans in the exceptional challenging conditions that we faced last year?
Yeah, thank you, Mohammed. I mean, I think the first thing that was very important is that we took the pandemic extremely seriously from the beginning, and maybe that has been a bit of a hangover. I was running a company in Saudi Arabia back in 2004, 2005, when we had the SARS the pandemic warning, and we put a lot of work into preparing for the eventuality of that pandemic, and it didn't actually result in the end in the same way, in the scale at least, that COVID-19 has done. So to some extent, we were pre-prepared mentally for this pandemic. And we reacted very quickly. We put very strict quarantine and testing requirements in place for all of our staff, particularly in the field. And we essentially treated each of our production plants like a miniature country in their own right, with controlled entry and people doing quarantine before they were allowed to rotate into the plant. Obviously, because that process became a little bit more lengthy, that meant that we had to adjust our work practices. So we adjusted for longer rotations, for example, and also to minimize the amount of contact that our staff might have had to potential sources of infection. But I think, honestly, a great deal of credit has to go to our staff themselves. I mean, they showed exceptional dedication and commitment throughout the year in sticking to their duties under very, very difficult circumstances. And after the travel restrictions were first imposed at the beginning of last year, in the March-April timeframe, some of our staff spent 3-4 months on location, because they couldn't get out of the location and we couldn't get people to replace them. And they just kept working continuously throughout that entire period, which is an amazing performance. And as I said, not only did they manage to keep production levels up, but in the case of the Cormor plant, they put this debottlenecking project in place that allowed us to increase production levels to record levels, which, under the circumstances, is really a truly amazing achievement.
And I think that's the one aspect with challenging times, you can see exceptional results, definitely. Yeah. And so I think that's absolutely true. Now, with regards to the IPR, I need you to explain to us what this deal is about, because there are lots of ongoing contradictions about, is it a joint venture? Is Danagas selling their onshore assets? What are the reasons behind this? And in what stage are we now with regards to your, let's say, put it in one term, your deal with IPR? Is it finalized or is it in the final stages? Where are we? So, that you elaborate more on that for us.
Yeah, no, I'm happy to do that. So let me kind of refer back to the earlier part of our discussion when I was talking about the company's global corporate strategic ambitions to focus on material growth opportunities, and how the onshore assets in Egypt, particularly being mature assets, we felt that it was time to exit from those and to allow management time, attention, and company resource to be focused on the growth opportunities. So that's kind of on the strategic side of it, and the reason why we're doing it, and the reason why we're keeping, for example, the Block 6 North El Arish block, which has got huge growth potential, which we, as I said, we are planning to drill our next exploration well there in 2023. But in terms of process, yeah, it is a sale of the asset. It's not a sale of Dana Gas Egypt, because we're going to keep Dana Gas Egypt, because we're going to use Dana Gas Egypt to continue our investments in Egypt, notably in Block 6. So we're selling the assets. These are the 14 development leases that we have. So those assets are being sold to IPR Energy. We executed the sales and purchase agreement for those onshore assets, and it's 100% of them, by the way. We're not retaining any equity in those assets. It's going to be sold in their entirety to IPR. And we completed our sale and purchase agreement in October of last year. Now there are a number of activities that need to be completed in order to finish the sales process. The first stage is what's called the pre-completion milestone. That essentially is that we need to get an agreement in principle from EGAS and EGPC for the sale to go ahead, and they need to approve the deed of assignment. And the deed of assignment has within it certain things that we need to satisfy EGAS and EGPC about. And so those are kind of box ticking exercises that we're currently going through, and we hope to be able to do that ideally later this month. The production sharing agreement allows 6 months for this process, this pre-completion process, but we hope to be able to get it done, as I said, this month. After that, agreement in principle from EGAS and EGPC, then the deed of assignment needs to go to the government, to the ministry for approval. Again, the production sharing agreement allows 6 months for this to be done. But again, we're hopeful that it can take place much faster than that, between, should we say, 60 and 90 days, so 2 to 3 months. And in that case, then it would mean that the entire sales process will have been completed by the end of May.
So we're hoping that the end of this final deal will end by May. That's what you're expecting.
That would be, yes. I mean, based on where we are now, of course, we had hoped that we would be much further along by now, but that's the result of COVID. Unfortunately, things are taking much longer to do. Great.
But as you did mention that Dana Gas Egypt is still present in Egypt, Dana Gas Egypt still sees interest in the Egyptian market. You are focusing on your Block 6 concession, which you believe there is huge potential of more than, you said, 20 TCF of reserves, I think. And so according to that, I have 2 questions in this angle. What are your plans for developing Block 6? When do we expect to see an aggressive operational plan for Block 6? And also, is Dana Gas looking into other opportunities within the gas sector in Egypt or not?
Okay, thanks, Mohammed. So absolutely, no, we are not leaving Egypt. Quite the opposite. We're kind of doubling down in Egypt, if you like, and we are really focusing on our amazing offshore exploration concession. That's the North El Arish Block 6 asset. And indeed, as you say, not only over 20 trillion cubic feet of gas we think has resources available, but also 500 million barrels of liquids production. And that's not just in one prospect, but it's spread across 5 prospects. Having said that, we have one particularly large prospect, and we're very excited about that prospect. That's a prospect we call Thuraya. And that is a prospect that has a dual objective. It has a deeper Cretaceous carbonate reef objective, which geologically is analogous to the Zohr field and to other fields that were discovered across the maritime border in Cypriot waters, namely Glaucus and just forgot the name of the other one, which popped out in my head. But anyway, there have been 3 discoveries in these carbonate type buildups in this part of the East Mediterranean. And we are very excited about the Thuraya prospect objective at that level. And then over the top of the Thuraya prospect, we have a Oligocene age basin floor fan targets, which have been proven in the Western Nile Delta. Obviously, BP has made a number of discoveries, Atoll, Salamat, and so forth. And in the eastern part of the Nile Delta, more recently, there have been discoveries by ENI in the Nor field, or the Nor prospect, Nor discovery, and the Amit discovery, which was drilled by Edison last year. So there are analogs, there are offset wells proving the presence of both reservoir and hydrocarbons. So we're extremely excited by the Thuraya prospect. And last year in 2020, we completed an infill 3D seismic survey over the prospect. That was because when we originally acquired the seismic in 2015, we had to leave a 5-kilometer gap against the maritime border because the military, we didn't get the military permits to acquire data all the way up to the border. But we managed to infill that 5-kilometer gap last year. And that has confirmed that the culmination of the Thuraya prospect at both the Oligocene level and at the deeper Cretaceous reef level are both in Egyptian territorial waters, and the bulk of the potential reserves, and potentially all of the reserves, are located in Egyptian territorial waters. So that's obviously very exciting. With the new data that we have acquired, that has allowed us to identify drilling locations. Once we've identified the drilling locations, that allows us to carry out pore pressure prediction studies. And those are absolutely key in order to be able to come up with the final well design and well casing scheme. Once we've done that, then we'll be in a position with the well design and the well casing scheme to start ordering long lead items that take anything up to 12 to 18 months to deliver. So putting all of that together into a timeline, we hope to be drilling the exploration well in the Thuraya prospect in, let's say, Q2 2023.
Excellent, excellent. This is great news, Patrick. And honestly, I have to thank you again for being with us live on this, because there are lots of, as you know, with the oil and gas sector and these changing times, lots of rumors come out, and we don't. And it's always good to clarify the position of the company and what the plans are, especially after the IPR acquisition. We thought Dana Gas is planning an exit, not just from its mature areas, but also from Egypt as a destination. But now I think you made it clear, and there's a huge prospect in the Block 6 that we are all anxious right now, hope for to see the success of that prospect. So we wish you good luck on that one. So how do you plan on maximizing the values of your asset in Egypt?
Well, as I said, Mohammed, we've pivoted away from our mature onshore assets and have pivoted our attention to our offshore Block 6. And that is now absolutely the focus of our attention going forwards. And all of our efforts are being put into preparing ourselves for drilling that very important exploration well in 2023.
So being, as you said, an operator in Egypt since 2007, since you acquired Centurion, what makes Egypt a popular investment destination for oil and gas industry? And how did you see it as Dana Gas that time, and how do you see it now?
So Mohammed, I joined Dana Gas in 2012. And actually, I joined Dana Gas originally as the Dana Gas general manager for Egypt. So I've that's where we first met as well, I believe. And so I've first-hand experience of living, working, operating in Egypt. And this may sound odd because that was not a particularly easy period of time from a, should we say, a societal or a geopolitical perspective. And so it may sound odd what I'm going to say now in that context, but the first observation I would say is that one of the reasons why Egypt remains such an attractive destination for the oil and gas industry is that it has a track record of fiscal and contractual stability. So despite all those political changes that occurred during that period of time from January 2011, the Egyptian production sharing contract has remained rock solid. And as has the government's commitment to respecting those contracts. Now, of course, I'm not diminishing the fact that there have been difficulties, not least around payment issues, particularly in the period 2011 through to 2016-17. But what is important is that at no point did the government say, "Oh, we don't owe you this money." The government always acknowledged, "We do owe you the money. We recognize we owe you the money. We have problems, so please bear with us and respect our request for flexibility of payment whilst we work through our difficulties." And for foreign investors and well, actually, for all investors for that matter, respect of contract and rule of law is absolutely critical. So that when you make your investments, you know that you're doing that in a stable commercial environment. Capital hates uncertainty. Investors want to know that when they put their money in, they can take the fruits of that investment out when the time comes. So I'd say that was the number one point. The second point, of course, is that there's been amazing exploration success in Egypt over the course of the last 5 years or so. I mean, we could sit here and reel off a list of multi-trillion cubic feet discoveries that have been made in that period, but obviously Zohr is the jewel in the crown. And what's notable about Zohr, and this is the third point that I wanted to make, has been the speed with which the field has been brought on stream. I have to say, I didn't believe it would be possible, and it's been an amazing achievement, not only from Eni as the contractor, but it's really a testament to the government's willingness to work constructively together with the oil industry to create an enabling environment to fast track development projects. And in addition to that, demonstrating the fiscal flexibility to negotiate gas prices that have allowed these relatively expensive deep water development projects to become economically viable. And it would be remiss of me not at this moment to comment on the absolutely incredible job that His Excellency Engineer Tariq Al-Molla, the Minister of Petroleum and Mineral Resources, has played over the course of the last 6 years. And under his leadership, the country has gone from being a net importer of gas once again to being a net exporter of gas. And also under his leadership, the East Mediterranean Gas Forum has taken shape and promises to enable the huge gas resources potential that has been discovered not only in Egypt, but in the area close by in Egypt, in the East Mediterranean gas basin, and to allow those resources to be developed and for Egypt to become the regional gas hub. So I think it's not surprising that under those circumstances that Egypt has deservedly become once again a very hot exploration postcode.
Absolutely. I think you summarized it very well, Patrick, and definitely did. Personally knowing Dana Gas and working with you and all the team at Dana Gas in the past year, since Dana Gas has been in Egypt in 2007, I've personally seen the growth of Dana Gas in Egypt, and you were one of the few companies that actually were able to have a very strong fingerprint, specifically in the gas industry in Egypt with the government in all these past years. So, how important has Egypt been for the growth of Dana Gas?
But it's been very important for Dana Gas growth, because essentially all the growth that Dana Gas has experienced up until 2017 came out of our Egyptian operations. We had in the Kurdistan region of Iraq, we'd put our plant in place, it was operating. And then in 2009, we had a dispute with the Kurdistan regional government, and then further development in the Kurdistan region stalled for a period of 8 years or so. So all of the growth that Dana Gas experienced in the interim has actually come from our Egyptian operations. And I've mentioned, the amazing exploration success that we've had and the increase in production that we have delivered since 2007. We've now operating 14 development leases, all at 100% working interest, obviously in conjunction with our joint venture partner, EGAS and Wasco. And we've grown to become the 5th largest gas producer in the country. And at our peak, we were producing nearly 40,000 barrels of oil equivalent per day, which I think is a fantastic achievement and testament to how important Egypt has been for Dana Gas over the course of the last 13 years.
So continuing on that, Patrick, can you also mention briefly, how did Dana Gas support the development of the sector in Egypt? So
since we came here in 2007, we've invested over $2 billion in Egypt. And as I said, that has allowed us to become the 5th largest gas producer. And in that process, we've actually created over $10 billion of value for the Egyptian economy as a whole, not just through our gas, condensate and LPG sales, but through the additional added value that we have contributed to the economy through job opportunities, both directly and indirectly. But in addition to that, I'm really proud of the sustainability development projects that the company has executed since its inception in the country. We are very conscious of our responsibilities to the communities in which we operate, and we have consistently invested in projects over the years in those communities to focus principally on improving healthcare, education, and quality of life for people in those communities through supporting, for example, startup opportunities and businesses for both men as well as women.
Yes, I can definitely recognize that, because I've witnessed lots of your different CSR investments that Dana Gas has done, and lots of the contribution that it has made in the country. So to summarize your Egypt focus in general, before we go into more general angles, how would you state it in one sentence? Is it that Dana Gas strategical focus in Egypt is changing based on where you see the potentials? Is that how you would summarize where Dana Gas position in Egypt is right now?
Yes, I mean, I'll summarize it by simply saying we are focusing on our growth exploration opportunities in country in Egypt, and that we see that we can make most impact on the company's future, deliver most value to our company's shareholders by focusing on those material growth opportunities. Now, in the case of Block 6, that comes with a certain degree of risk, because it's exploration, and you never know until the bit hits the reservoir what you're going to find. But we're very enthusiastic about what we've seen. We've got a very robust geological model. The volumes are huge. We feel that we've mitigated the risks to a great degree, and that we have a hugely investable opportunity in our Block 6 asset in Egypt. And that's going to be the focus of our attention going forwards.
Thank you, Patrick. Going generically, let's leave Egypt on the side, which also Egypt is a very important part of what we're going to ask right now. But Yani, the oil and gas industry is trying to move forward from 2020. And with the oil price back up in its normal, let's say, average price range, and it seems in a good condition where it is right now, what is your strategy, Dana Gas strategy for growth?
Well, we've talked about Egypt. That's obviously our focus there on growth through exploration in Egypt. In the Kurdistan region of Iraq, we're just beginning the journey of growing our incredible resource base there. As I said, we have over 1 billion barrels of oil equivalent 2P reserves, Dana gas share. And those are in discovered resources. So development there is going to be, growth there is all going to be around appraisal and development in these two world-class fields that we've already have the rights to develop. So that's going to be the focus going forwards. I have to say, I'm surprised at the oil price where it currently stands today. I have to question whether it is rational when there is 8 million barrels of shut-in production just in OPEC alone, and probably at least another 2 million barrels of shut-in production in other countries. So, it doesn't seem entirely realistic to me. Obviously, we're very delighted about that, but we obviously need to be cautious about not being overly optimistic going forward. So as always, we hope for the best and plan for the worst. But clearly, I think we've got the worst of the oil price crash behind us. I think rationality is kicking in. Prices are getting back to what they really should be in a balanced world of supply and demand, and that means that the industry sector is investable once again, and we are certainly looking at growth opportunities in the region. We always do that. We continue to look at opportunities. Both in Egypt as well as Iraq and in the wider region. Although over the course of the years, we've looked at a huge number of opportunities in the region, and it's always been extremely difficult to find opportunities that can compete with the opportunities that we found or already had available to us in either Egypt or the Kurdistan region of Iraq. But where and when we find opportunities that can compete and are investable and make sense for us as a strategic fit, we will certainly be looking at making investments in further growth opportunities going forwards.
Great. Patrick, in 2020, Dana Gas decided to demerge its upstream business. What was the reason behind that decision?
Well, you probably remember that when Dana Gas started in 2005, it actually started as a midstream company. It started as the company that was going to import gas from Iran. We had the pipeline and the infrastructure and the gas processing plant that was going to process the slightly sour gas that was going to come. 600 million standard cubic feet per day of gas. It was a huge volume of gas, 10% of the total UAE gas demand at the time, and actually still is today. And so a very significant volume of gas. And that was the project that the company was launched on in 2005. And as you know, history, the Iranians unfortunately did not live up to their contractual obligations and never delivered the gas. But the infrastructure is still there. We still own it. The people who invested in Dana Gas at that time were looking to invest in a company which had a certain risk-reward profile, and generally, transmitting pipelines, infrastructure, processing. These are relatively risk-free, utility-type businesses, and they create utility type returns. So you're talking about consistent, reliable revenues on an annual basis, and something that particularly investors in this part of the world really appreciate, because it can be quickly and easily converted into dividend payments to the investments. E&P world is very different from that. As you know, and as we've experienced over the course of the last 8 years, it's a bit of a roller coaster ride. You're very much a a slave, as it were, to the commodity price cycle. You're a slave to a lot more risk in the form of subsurface risk, both either through exploration, even through the development phase. You sometimes get surprises. So it's a much more risky profile. And there are people who may have invested originally in Dana Gas seeking a certain kind of risk reward. And when Dana Gas, as a result of the fact that project never delivered, found themselves investing in a company that was a pure E&P play and with a different kind of risk reward profile. And the idea then behind the demerger was, well, let's then separate these two businesses out again and allow our shareholders to decide which piece of the business they prefer to invest in, whether they like, the roller coaster ride on the E&P side, or whether they much prefer the more calm waters of a midstream kind of utility entity on the other end of the spectrum.
Yeah, great. Yeah, I understand that now. So on both angles, if it's midstream or upstream, does Dana Gas have any expansion plans in the coming near future?
Well, as I said, we're always looking, Mohammed. With discussions around the energy transition, of course, going forwards, we're also considering what that means to us as Dana Gas. And whilst we haven't by any means landed clearly on any specific growth projects, we are certainly being a bit more divergent in our thinking, perhaps, with respect to the future of Dana Gas than a traditional narrow approach would have been. So we're looking at a wide range of opportunities, but as I say, they have to compete economically with the existing portfolio of opportunities we have. We've got such a huge potential for investment in our existing assets that it has to be a very good project in order to be able to compete against what we've got.
Thank you so much, Patrick, for answering lots of our questions today. I think you've made lots of our questions very clear to our audience and to everybody that works in the oil and gas sector, specifically in Egypt, and that are keen on seeing Dana Gas always present in Egypt with its operations and activities, and all the best of luck with your finalizing the acquisition with the IPR. I hope that goes well, and we're looking forward to hearing lots of more news on Block 6, which I'm sure there will be lots of excitements coming out from Dana Gas on that, hopefully in the very, very, very soon. We have lots of questions that came in from our attendees today, so we'll be sharing them with you, and hopefully when you're in Cairo next time, we'll have a chance to catch up physically by this time, hopefully. Thank you so much, Patrick.
Absolutely, Myron. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to talk, and it's been a great pleasure. I'll be very happy to collate those questions. Please send them through and we'll respond to them. And as you say, inshallah, next time we'll be meeting in person.
Inshallah, definitely. Thank you everyone for joining us for another episode of our exclusive interview with the CEO of Dana Gas, Patrick Allman-Ward. Thank you so much, and see you next time. Thank you.
Thanks, Mohammed. Thanks everybody for joining. Appreciate it. Bye-bye.